Proceeding with another classification of quantitative research under descriptive research, we have the correlational research. Okay? So, correlational research was actually introduced to you. Okay, it was actually introduced to you when we discussed descriptive research during our previous video presentations. So, specifically, with the different or with the 8 classifications of research, okay, in our previous video presentations. So, in correlational research, so just reviewing this type of research, it is a non-experimental research. So, non-experimental research meaning to say it is descriptive in nature. Okay, it is a non-experimental research. And this type of research is greatly concerned in measuring 2 variables. So, it measures 2 variables in which these 2 variables, let's say, understands and assesses the statistical relationship between them with no interference from any extraneous variable. So, let us try to break that down. Correlational research is concerned in measuring 2 variables in which it understands and assesses, so meaning to say test, assesses the statistical relationship so we have this statistical relationship between them without any interference, or meaning to say without any interference from any other variables. So, meaning to say there is no manipulation of variables. No variable manipulation. Okay? Manipulation. So, it aims to show the association between 2 variables. Okay? So, correlational research aims to show association between 2 variables. When we say association, how is one variable associated to another? Okay, so that is correlational research. So correlational research actually have several characteristics. So one of the characteristics of correlational research is that it is non-experimental. Okay, so that is one characteristic, first characteristic. Meaning to say, variables are not needed to be manipulated. Non-experimental. It happens naturally. Okay? But, even though it is non-experimental, it still uses a scientific methodology so that it can either agree or disagree with a hypothesis. So, it only measures and observes relationship among variables without, let's say, changing the variable's properties. Okay? So, that is what we mean by non-experimental. So, non-experimental, it means that it uses scientific methodology even though there is no variable manipulation. And also, it only measures and observes relationship, measures and observes relationships among variables without changing their properties. Okay? So, meaning to say, study the natural relationship between variables. Okay? Another characteristic of correlational research is that correlational research is backward-looking. So, what do we mean by backward-looking? Backward-looking means that it uses historical data. Okay? Uses historical data that can be seen, applied, or compared to the relationships over time. So one example of, let's say, one example that can show that correlational research is backward-looking is the use of the curvilinear graph. Okay? So, the curvilinear graph. Meaning to say, it studies data over time. It sees the fluctuation of data over time. So, one example is the curvilinear graph. Okay? And another thing, correlational research is dynamic. Why? When we say dynamic, there is a change over a specific period of time. It is dynamic because patterns between two variables are not constant. So meaning they change over time. Like this one. Okay? For example, this curvilinear graph. It started going down. But as time goes by, it started going up. Or another example, we have a linear graph. So at first, the relationship shows that the relationship is here. Okay? But as time goes by, this let's say this point here goes down. Something like that. So the data changes over time. The relationship changes over time. Okay? So that is correlational research. Now, as we talk about the patterns in correlational research, let us have a review of these patterns. So we will now present to you or discuss to you the patterns in correlational research. So the patterns in correlational research. So remember that during our previous video presentations, we gave you an overview of the different patterns. So we have this pattern which shows, okay, this is a linear pattern which shows a, let's say, a direct proportional relationship between two variables. So this is direct proportional. Then we have a pattern that shows indirect proportional. Okay? And actually, these two patterns are linear patterns. Then we also have patterns that fluctuates over time. So this will be known as the curvilinear patterns. Okay? So this will be known as curvilinear patterns. And there is also a pattern that shows scattered relationship. So this one is scattered relationship. Now, these patterns are actually the three main types of correlational patterns. So these are the three main types of correlational patterns. So the first type of correlational pattern is the positive correlation. So, this one, this graph here, this linear graph here, will be known as the positive correlation. Positive correlation. Now, positive correlation states that as the x variable or the variable in here increases, the y variable in here also increases. And as the x variable decreases, the y variable also decreases. So positive correlation will be known as direct proportional. Direct proportional. Next, we have this graph here. Now, this graph here shows that as the x increases, the y decreases. So, as the x increases, the y decreases. So, it is same as the y increases, the x decreases. This shows negative correlation. And negative correlation will be known as indirect proportional. Okay? Indirect proportional. Then the third main type is this pattern. So, meaning to say, if we have scattered points in a graph, there is no correlation. So, when there is no correlation, x and y are not related. Okay? There is no connection between the two variables. No correlation. No connection. And the additional pattern is this curvilinear pattern. So, in curvilinear pattern, it fluctuates. Okay? So, in curvilinear pattern, the graph fluctuates. So, from, let's say, as the x increases, the y decreases over time. But as time goes on, as the x increases, the y also increases. Okay? So, same with this one. So, as the, let's say, x increases, okay, as the x increases, the y also increases. But as time goes by, as the x increases, the y decreases. So, the pattern fluctuates. And meaning to say, okay, we see here, this one is the positive correlation. While this one, no. This one is the negative correlation rather. Okay? This one is the negative correlation, while this one is the positive correlation. So, as we can see here. So, meaning to say, it is mixed positive correlation. Mixed positive negative correlation. Okay? So, this will be known as mixed positive negative correlation. So, meaning to say, there is a dynamic curvilinear relationship. Dynamic because it changes over time. It fluctuates over time. So, this is dynamic curvilinear relationship among two variables that are not manipulated. Okay? So, this will be the additional knowledge from your previous knowledge regarding the different patterns in correlational research. Okay? So, for our next video presentation, we will be proceeding to the last example of quantitative research under descriptive research, which is causal comparative research.